Hello, listeners. Today, Ravi and Jam speak with Mats Larsson about the transition to electromobility. Mats is the founder of the Global Energy Transformation Institute and has worked with the large-scale transformation to electromobility and sustainability since 2004. As part of the energy trilemma, in this episode, we check the effort to achieve an electrified transportation. And please, do not forget to subscribe if you aren't yet. Ravi, Jose, over to you.
Thank you, Ava, and welcome, Mats, to the Unlocking the Energy Trilemma podcast.
Thank you.
Good evening, Matt. Yeah.
So, as we do with all our speakers, I would like to ask you to share with our audience a fact or figure that is relevant for you with the energy trilemma and the topic of today, which is transportation and the electrification and energy transition. So what do you bring us, Mats?
Yes, I've studied the amount of resources that will be needed in order to change all vehicles in Europe to electric. And in order to do that, about half the electricity that is currently produced in a year in Europe would have to be needed. That's the equivalent approximately of 150 nuclear reactors or several 100,000 wind turbines.
Matt, as we shift from it seems like you would like this electrification requirement come through renewable or nuclear sources. So as we shift from centralized fossil-based systems to distributed renewable energy networks, how much regulation evolved to support the flexibility and resilience of the network?
I think there will be a need for regulation, but there will also be a big need for coordination of different aspects of this change. Activities need to be driven on several fronts, such as expansion of power generation, expansion of power grid capacity, charging infrastructure, and not least training of all the individuals that need to take part in this change.
Mats, new oil reserves are still being discovered, Suriname, the Barents Sea, Brazil, etc., and global oil production capacity remains robust. If the end of oil isn't near, does that weaken the long-term case for electric vehicles?
No, on the contrary, I think it strengthens the case for electric vehicles because, as we all know, is a finite resource, and we need to start developing systems that can replace petroleum fueled transportation. The imminent peak oil situation would strengthen the arguments for change of transportation system.
And from your perspective, how well prepared are the current grid frameworks to integrate the pressures of transport and distributed renewable energy?
And not very well prepared, I have to say, because very big investments will be needed in the expansion of power grids. We did an analysis in one logistics area here in southern Sweden where 1,400 trucks visit every day. It's the place where 80% of all fruit and vegetables that are imported to Sweden pass through on a daily basis. And we found that the demand for electricity for charging, as these trucks will have to be fast charged to be able to continue their transportation activities after they have unloaded or loaded, is at this area. And to achieve that, very big charging capacity will be needed and large investments will be needed in grid capacity if all these trucks will be electric in the near future.
You touched a very important point because EV sales only represent part of the story. To electrify transportation, there is also a need for large expansion of charging infrastructure. And I understand, roughly speaking, that there are about 2 million public charging stations in China, and in the rest of the world, there are like 1.5 million charging stations, of which half of it they could be in Europe, let's say. but the estimations of the necessary charging points in Europe to achieve 2030, let's say, most conservative scenarios are huge. So
Yes.
how are they? How many charging stations are we far? Are they achievable?
No, achievable or not, we need to increase the speed of installation of charging stations because so far only 3 to 4% of all cars in Europe and less than 1% of all trucks are electric. And we haven't even started to experience a situation where a large share of all vehicles are electric, not in any country. But in the leading countries, we have 14, 15% electric cars in Sweden, but still there, 50% of those are hybrids with small batteries. So we haven't experienced the situation where a large amount of electricity will be needed for charging. But McKinsey in 2022, I think, they made a project investigating how much will have to be invested. And they found that installation of new charging stations will have to increase by about tenfold or more in order to meet the requirements over the coming decades.
Mats, both electric roads, smart charging infrastructure, these sound very promising. In your view, what are the biggest technical and market barriers or even political barriers to their deployment at large scale? And you brought up, I think Jose brought up the deployment in China. Is the infrastructure in China drawing from renewable sources, or are they drawing power from fossil sources?
I believe Chinese power generation is still primarily based on fossil sources, coal-fired plants. I think the biggest hurdles for the expansion of electric roads are, firstly, the current situation. We don't need them at present. There's no rationale for building them. So why invest in big systems of electric roads when we don't see a need for them, when there would be only a small number of vehicles using them every day, and we would need to build electric road systems that extend throughout Europe or throughout the United States, depending on which part of the world we're in. And in order to mobilize the resources, analysis will have to be done illustrating the number of chargers that would have to be needed for stationary charging. I mean, in Germany, France, and other parts of Europe, in the US as well, I'm sure there would be a need for football fields of chargers every 60 kilometers of motorway. And that's a huge amount of chargers. And for peak needs before big holidays, during vacation, in the summer and so on, even more chargers would be needed. So to cover the peaks, huge amounts of chargers would be needed. And most of those would only have to be used for short periods of time during the peaks of the year. And with electric roads, we wouldn't need to install so many stationary chargers. Some, of course, but not as many. And we could save a lot of money also on expansion of power grids and also reduce the amount of power generation that would have to be installed. So in order to build a case for this, politicians would have to commission analysis of these different scenarios. How many chargers would we need? How much power grid capacity would we need if we went for stationary charging? How much would we have to invest in case we would go for electric roads? And in order to go through with this, we would also need to create a mindset similar to the one we need when we invest in nuclear reactors or other big sources of power generation, and say, what will we need 10 years ahead from now? What will we need 20 years ahead? And say, what do we need to start? What types of programs do we need to start in order to set in motion a process that can cater to the needs of future generations for charging and for power capacity and power generation?
Mats, we are here to speak about the energy trilemma, and I'm always very attracted by the financials of the energy transition. I fully agree that electric vehicles are more efficient than, let's say, conventional vehicles. But if we need a huge infrastructure to charge the electric vehicles in an equivalent way, let's say it's available whenever I need it and in the amount I need it, and I need to invest a lot in the grid, and I need 100, let's say 100 nuclear power plants on top of it, and so on. Is it worth it? Let's say, do the numbers add up?
We don't know because nobody has done the math completely to investigate this. But what we do know is that we need transportation in the future as well. And we know that oil is a finite resource and we can't use it forever. So we need to build a new system. And we have made big investments in power generation before, and we've made big investments in other types of systems before, power transmission and power grids and so on, and that has always worked out for us. And we wouldn't have the society we have at present unless previous generations in the 1950s, 1960s had made the decisions to build nuclear power plants and the power infrastructure and so on that we now have, and we can enjoy reasonable power prices in most parts of the world. So in Sweden, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and up until the 80s, we prepared for, people then, politicians and business leaders, prepared for increasing power infrastructure. We made huge investments in hydroelectric power. We built 12 nuclear plants across Sweden, and we can now enjoy the fruits of these investments. We need to look ahead, and we can't be driven by fear saying, no, we can't prepare for the future because the future will be so bad for us. So instead, we need to build courage and do the analysis that will be needed. And we need to make the decisions that will be necessary in order to build these infrastructure systems that will be needed for coming generations.
And do you believe that regulators across the world, by and large, are enabling such investments that would be critical for grid expansion, smart charging, and so on?
Not yet. We are seeing that the countries are going in the other direction. Some countries have started, like the Swedish government have started to decide to build new nuclear reactors. We are expanding wind, etc. But the German government for the past 10, 15, maybe 20 years have gone towards the energy change, the Energiewende. They've banned the use and the construction of nuclear power plants. And they will, I'm sorry to say, nuclear plants will be needed as part of the mix in order to stabilize power grids and to stabilize the infrastructure, the electricity systems. So there is a real need to mobilize not only the green powers of governments or the green voters in society, but to look at the full, complete picture and say, we do need a mix of different generation technologies. We do need a mix of different propulsion technologies for the time being, at least. And we need to prepare for a situation in the future that is very different from the one we are experiencing now, but that can be as good for future generations as the situation we are experiencing right now.
You have mentioned governments. Where do you see the biggest mismatch between ambition and action when it comes to national energy transition strategies in general?
I have to say Germany, I think they have changed their power system towards wind in such a way that the balancing of the entire European power grid is in danger. And we are experiencing repercussions from this in other countries as well, where we in Sweden have to deliver energy, and we are experiencing the high power prices from Germany being exported to us. And we also see the failure in Spain earlier this year as an example of what can happen if the generation systems get out of balance and we don't have enough base load power to support the systems when, for example, solar goes down.
Excellent. So I think that was a great discussion, Jose. Do you have any final questions for Mark?
Well, as we ask to all the speakers, I would ask you, if you had a magic wand and you could unlock the energy trilemma, what would you do?
I'd get politicians to dig deeper into these issues and open up for a wider range of aspects and look at the entire picture for the future. Look at the different opportunities, possibilities, and analyze the amount of power generation needed, the amount of grid capacity needed, the amount of chargers and so on that would be needed, and build a vision for the future that encompasses all these different resources that need to be built.
Fantastic. Mats, thank you very much for joining us in the podcast, and we'll follow the Institute and you in the media.
Thank you very much, Ravi and Jose.
Thank you, Mats. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We hope you liked this conversation. Follow us on LinkedIn or subscribe for free to the podcast on the platform of your choice, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, or Apple. Because in the next episode, Ravi and Jam will speak with another expert in the industry to unlock the energy trilemma.